My life was a loop, a perfectly polished, predictable loop. My name is Evelyn, and for most of my 24 years, my world was built on deadlines and coffee. I'm a graphic designer in Toronto. From the outside, I had it all. Great friends, a decent apartment with a view of the city, and a career that was going somewhere. But inside, I felt like I was running on autopilot. I'd go to sleep scrolling through 1,000 perfect lives on my phone and wake up to a world that felt disconnected. We were all chasing something. More money, more likes, more validation. But were we ever truly connecting? I'd look at the city, at all the people, and wonder if anyone else felt it. This nagging spiritual emptiness, this void that no amount of success or busyness could fill. I was going through the motions, a ghost in my own life. I had no idea that my entire world was about to be shaken. I didn't know the life I knew was already on the verge of ending. It started subtly. A flicker in the lights at the coffee shop, a random crash on my computer right when I was about to save my work. At first, I blamed outdated wiring or just a glitchy system, but then it started happening everywhere. The subway train would stop mid-tunnel for no reason, and every single person's phone would lose service at the same time. The silence in those moments was terrifying. The strange feeling wasn't just in the technology, it was in the air. People seemed on edge, jumpy, a tension you could almost touch. The news headlines I used to skim now felt like a constant stream of alarms. Stories of unexpected power grids failing in different countries, massive solar flares captured on satellite images, and a strange new kind of static interference affecting global communications. I tried to convince myself it was all just a coincidence, a sign of our modern, fragile world. But my gut told me it was more than that. It felt like the world was holding its breath. Everywhere I looked, the signs were there. A strange metallic taste in the air after a storm. Birds flying in erratic, confused patterns. That deep, spiritual ache I always felt inside started to feel like a countdown. A quiet, unsettling hum beneath the surface of my normal life. It was no longer a whisper. It was a low, constant vibration that told me something was coming. Something big. Something I couldn't run from. I felt it in my bones. That day was different. The sky over Toronto was a strange shade of ochre, the air thick with a static charge I could almost taste. I was on my way home from work, just another Tuesday. I was trying to focus on my favorite podcast, but the audio kept skipping, cutting out with a harsh buzz. Every street lamp I passed flickered violently, as if struggling to stay on. The world was screaming, but no one seemed to notice. I was just another car on the highway, caught in the endless flow of traffic, a small part of a city that was vibrating on the edge of a great unknown. Suddenly ahead of me, a massive transport truck swerved, not just a little, but violently, as if the driver had lost all control. The truck's lights flashed erratically, then went completely dark. It was a single, terrifying silence amidst the roar of the highway, a silence that seemed to swallow up all the noise around it. Time slowed down. The car behind me slammed on its brakes. A chorus of horns erupted, but I was frozen, watching the truck hurtle toward me. I saw the splintered glass from its side window, the tires locked and smoking. There was no screech of rubber, no warning, just a quiet, horrifying glide towards my small car. I instinctively turned the wheel, but it was useless. My car, my little bubble of normalcy, was completely unresponsive. The electronics went dead. The engine fell silent. It was like I was a toy car, helpless and powerless in the path of a giant. The impact was not the violent explosion I expected. It was a single, sharp crack that reverberated through me, a sound that felt both inside and outside my head. I felt the steering wheel crumple, the windshield shatter, but it was all strangely muted. There was no pain, not at first, just a shocking emptiness. I felt my body compress, the bones in my chest crackling like dry twigs. A searing, white-hot flash of light filled my vision, and then there was nothing. The roar of the crash was gone. The world was gone. I was just a point of consciousness. I felt myself rising, not floating, not flying, but rising with an incredible, gentle speed. Below me, I could see my body, a broken, crumpled shell in the driver's seat. It was a strange, detached view, like watching a movie with a character I barely knew. The pain I should have been feeling was now just a distant memory, a faint echo of a life that was already over. An overwhelming sense of peace washed over me, a feeling so complete and so profound that every moment of my existence felt like a lie in comparison. All the stress, the anxieties, the emptiness, it was all gone. I was pure thought, pure existence. I was no longer Evelyn from Toronto, a graphic designer with a mountain of unfulfilled doubts. I was just me, free from the confines of flesh and bone. The air around me was warm and sweet, filled with a soundless music I could feel in my very being. This was the moment everything truly ended, and the universe began. The world I had known was over. My life had a silent, definitive period placed at the end of its sentence. But I wasn't scared. I wasn't sad. I was simply at peace. And that was when I saw it. Think back to a moment in your life where you felt a profound shift or a strange premonition. A moment where the world seemed to hold its breath. What was that experience like? Share it in the comments below. Your story might be the sign someone else needs to see. The world fell away, and I was pure sensation. No lungs to breathe, no eyes to see, yet I felt more alive than ever before. The silence after the crash wasn't empty. It was a fullness I'd never known. My consciousness was a singular point, weightless and free, floating in a sea of utter calm. The auras of the city, the cars, the people, they were all visible to me now, a symphony of light and energy that I was effortlessly moving through. I was no longer an observer. I was a part of it all. Fear, grief, and regret, the very things that defined my life on autopilot, simply didn't exist here. They were concepts I had outgrown. Ahead of me, a light appeared. It wasn't a distant point, but a vast, all-encompassing brilliance that seemed to draw me toward it with a gentle magnetic pull. It was not a physical light, not like the sun or a light bulb. This light was woven from every color I had ever seen, and 1,000 more I had no words for. It was not bright in a way that hurts the eyes. It was a soft, glowing presence that felt like pure, concentrated love. Every particle of it seemed to hold infinite wisdom, infinite warmth. As I moved closer, I felt a deep recognition, as if I was coming home to a place I had always known but forgotten. All the spiritual emptiness I had carried in my life was being filled by this light, overflowing with a feeling of belonging that dissolved every single doubt I had ever had. And then, I was at the threshold. I wasn't entering a room or a space. I was entering a consciousness. Standing before me, or perhaps within me, was a figure. He wasn't defined by a body of flesh and blood, but by an essence that was both ancient and new. His form was light, sculpted from the very substance I had been traveling through. But his eyes were the clearest, most profound things I had ever witnessed. They were older than time itself, holding the pain of every sorrow and the joy of every triumph since the beginning of the world. They looked at me, and in that gaze, I felt known. Not just my name or my past, but every thought I'd ever had, every fear I'd ever hidden, every act of kindness and cruelty. He knew me completely, and yet, there was only a feeling of unconditional acceptance. He did not speak with a voice, but with a knowing that flowed directly into my spirit. He showed me things, not with words, but with images and feelings that were sharper and more real than any memory. I saw my life, but I also saw the lives of countless others. He showed me the interconnectedness of all things, the fragile web of humanity that was being strained to its breaking point. I saw the signs I had noticed, the flickering lights, the strange weather, the tension in the air, and understood them for what they were, warnings. He showed me the future, not as an inevitable destination, but as a path we were on. I saw the world covered in a thick, suffocating darkness, a final, global blackout that would silence everything. No phones, no internet, no power. Just a world plunged into silence and chaos. He didn't show me this to frighten me, but to prepare me. He communicated a timeline, a window of opportunity to change the course. I felt the number 72 stamped into my soul. 72 hours. That was all we had left from the moment the final signs would appear. This wasn't a punishment. It was a choice, a final chance to turn back toward the light. The feeling of his presence was a promise, a confirmation that even in the coming darkness, there was always a path back to this feeling, back to him. Then, the feeling of peace began to fade. The light dimmed, not in intensity, but in distance. I felt a gentle pull, a soft resistance, as if something was drawing me away from this perfect reality. I fought it, desperately, wanting to stay in the arms of that unconditional love, to remain in the presence of that profound truth. But the pull was stronger, and I knew, with a heartbreaking certainty, that my journey was not over. It was just beginning. Have you ever felt a connection so profound that it transcended words? A moment of peace or understanding that seemed to come from beyond this world? Share your experience in the comments. Let us know if you believe in a connection that goes beyond what we can see or touch. The vision shifted from a feeling of unconditional love to a cold, hard truth. The presence before me was no longer just a source of peace. It was a beacon of urgent, critical knowledge. The message didn't come through words, but as a total understanding, a complete download of information that made every cell in my being shudder with the weight of it. I saw not just a simple power outage, but the global blackout. And I saw why it was coming. It was a total system collapse, a cosmic silence. The blackout wasn't caused by a solar storm or a cyber attack. It was an event of spiritual and physical consequence, a perfect storm born from our collective human disconnection. He showed me how our obsession with technology had created a global dependence so profound, it had become our single greatest vulnerability. We built our lives on a network that was fragile and finite, and we had forgotten how to exist without it. This wasn't an act of punishment. It was a final, devastating reset. I was shown a world plunging into total darkness. Not a flicker of light from coast to coast. All at once, the power grids would simply cease to exist. I saw planes falling like stones from the sky as their systems went dead. I saw silent trains stopped on their tracks, subways trapped underground. The lights in every hospital, every home, every office building went out in a final, deafening silence. The world I knew, the one built on the hum of electricity, would be gone in an instant. The global community I felt so detached from in life would be completely severed. No phones, no internet, no communication, just pure isolation. The terror wasn't in the dark, it was in the silence, the complete and utter silence that would replace the constant hum of our modern lives. The vision showed me the chaos that would follow, the panic in the streets, the desperation for food and water, the sudden and brutal reality that we were on our own. It was a forced return to a primitive existence, a test of our very humanity. Would we find our way back to community without the crutch of our technology, or would we succumb to chaos? But then, the message became clearer. I was shown the signs that would precede this event. They were already happening, but they would intensify until they were undeniable. A series of 3 unprecedented, perfectly synchronized solar flares that would not just disrupt, but completely erase our technological grid. An audible, low-frequency hum that would be heard all over the globe, a sound that no one would be able to explain. And the final critical sign, the failure of the last remaining global communication network, a network believed to be unhackable and unbreakable. When that went silent, we would have exactly 72 hours. That's what I was shown. 72 hours left to prepare, to find our loved ones, to seek shelter, to make peace. The presence before me looked at me with a profound sorrow, and I knew why I was being shown this. Not to be a prophet of doom, but a messenger of hope. He wasn't judging me. He was asking me to carry this truth back. As the vision began to fade and the light pulled away, the weight of this knowledge settled on my soul, a heavy, cold stone in the place where I had just felt infinite peace. I was no longer an ordinary woman. I was a witness, and the clock was already ticking. Imagine you have just 72 hours left before a global blackout. No power, no internet, no communication. What would be the very first thing you do? Share your immediate plan in the comments below. The peace was gone. The overwhelming love of the light and the knowing presence were ripped away, replaced by the searing, agonizing shock of my own broken body. I felt the familiar weight of my flesh, but it was all wrong. A chorus of beeping machines pierced the sterile air, and I felt a sharp, metallic tang in my mouth. My head throbbed, a dull hammer hitting against my skull with every beat of my heart. My left arm, I realized, was suspended in a sling, and the rest of me was a symphony of aches and pains. I was back, and it hurt. A kind face, A nurse peered down at me. Her lips were moving, but the words were a jumble of sound I couldn't process. All I could see was the memory of a golden light, a love so pure it had no name. All I could feel was the weight of a world-altering prophecy. I tried to tell her. I opened my mouth, but my throat was dry, my voice a broken whisper. The blackout. 72 hours. She smiled gently, patting my hand. It's okay, honey. You just rest. You've been through a lot. Her words were meant to be comforting, but they were a dagger to my soul. She saw me as a victim of a car crash. I knew I was a witness to the end of the world. My family arrived soon after. My mother's face was a mask of relief and tears. My father's was etched with worry. They were so happy I was alive, clinging to the reality they knew, a reality where their daughter was in a hospital bed, not a messenger from the divine. I tried to explain it to them. I saw Jesus, I whispered, the words feeling foreign on my tongue. He told me about the blackout. The signs are already appearing. Their faces went from relief to concern. They exchanged a look I knew all too well, the look of shared worry for someone who isn't quite right. My mother told me it was just a dream, a side effect of the trauma. My father just squeezed my hand and told me not to worry about anything, to just focus on getting better. They wanted to fix me, but they didn't understand that I was already changed, fundamentally and irrevocably. The isolation was crushing. I was surrounded by people who loved me, yet I had never felt more alone. The perfect telepathic clarity of the vision was now a jumble of disjointed memories that no one could comprehend. They'd ask me about the crash, and I would try to tell them about the silence, the strange light, the feeling of rising above it all. They would just nod, their eyes full of pity. The doctors spoke of post-traumatic stress and head injuries, of psychological responses to near-death events. They gave my experience a medical name, a diagnosis that neatly put my vision into a box they could understand. But the truth was too big for any box. It was a prophecy, a truth. It wasn't until a few days later, while watching a brief segment on a news channel, that a chill ran down my spine. The report was about an unprecedented, inexplicable power grid failure in a small remote town in the Pacific Northwest. The technicians couldn't explain it. It defied all logic and had no clear cause. Just a town, plunged into silence and darkness. The reporter quickly moved on to a more cheerful story. But for me, it was a moment of profound, terrifying clarity. A singular, unmistakable sign. They thought I was hallucinating. They thought I was a victim. But I knew the truth. My life as I knew it had ended, and the world's was about to. Akunashtim, have you ever had a deeply personal experience that you tried to share, only to be met with disbelief or misunderstanding? How did it feel to know a truth that no one else could see? Share your story in the comments. Your experience is valid. Yeah, I went home, but I never left the hospital. The walls of my apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like the padded room of an asylum. My body was healing, but my mind was a battlefield. I'd watch the news with a new kind of terror, a knowing I had no right to possess. They talked about rising fuel prices and political tensions, but I knew the real story was in the silent headlines, the ones everyone else dismissed. The scattered, unexplainable power grid failures had begun to multiply. A hospital in Beijing, an entire neighborhood in Rio de Janeiro, a major financial district in Frankfurt, all plunged into darkness without warning, without cause. The news called them regional blackouts and technical anomalies. I called them the first drops of rain before the flood. Then came the hum, a low, constant, almost imperceptible drone. It was a sound that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. At first, it was a tiny mention on a late-night radio show, a call from a listener in rural Japan who swore he could hear it. Within days, it was a global phenomenon. People were posting videos and audio clips online, all of them capturing the same, unexplainable sound. Scientists offered theories about geological shifts or atmospheric pressure, but I knew from the vision that this was the second sign. The sound of the world's fragile digital heartbeat slowing down, a death rattle that no one could understand. My friends would joke about it, calling it the cosmic buzz, but for me, it was the sound of my 72 hours drawing nearer. I tried to talk to my parents again, to my friends. I showed them the articles about the blackouts, the forums about the hum. Don't you see? I pleaded, my voice trembling. This is it. This is what I saw. He showed me this was coming. Their faces were full of compassion and pity. My mom suggested I talk to a therapist. My dad looked at me with a sorrow that was more painful than any anger. They saw a frightened young woman who was traumatized by her crash. They couldn't see the witness to a cosmic event. I was standing in a fire no one else could feel, and the loneliness was suffocating. I saw them going about their lives, planning weekend trips, complaining about their bosses, arguing about a celebrity scandal, and I felt a cold, deep dread for them. They were all sleepwalking toward the edge of a cliff. The final sign was more public, more undeniable. The news was dominated by it for days. Unprecedented solar flare activity. Not a single powerful flare, but a series of 3 that erupted from the sun, with a synchronized, terrifying force that baffled astronomers. They were too far to cause a full blackout, but they caused massive disruptions. Satellites went offline. Global positioning systems failed for hours. My phone and laptop were rendered useless, not by a power outage, but by a total network collapse. Every attempt to connect was met with a dead signal. This was it. The final critical warning. I could feel the clock in my soul begin to tick. The 72-hour countdown had begun. It wasn't a metaphor. It was real. The world was still turning, but its heartbeat had changed. People were complaining about not having signal, and experts were scrambling to restore service. But I knew it was a lost cause. My voice, my warning, was just a whisper in the wind. The final sign had appeared. The silent world I was shown was no longer a vision of the future. It was a promise of a future that was just 72 hours away, and I had to find a way to make them believe. Siamadurost. Have you ever noticed something strange in the news or in your daily life? A coincidence, a weird event that you couldn't explain? What was it? And did you have a feeling it meant something more? Share your thoughts below. The final solar flares were more than a news headline. They were the tolling of a final bell in my soul. I could feel the countdown, a psychic clock ticking away the 72 hours I had left to make a difference. The world saw a glitch in the system. I saw the beginning of the end. My isolation was no longer just a burden. It was a fire I had to ignite. I had to become the warning I was meant to be. I couldn't just whisper the truth anymore. I had to shout it. I started with what I knew: social media. I recorded a video, not with a script, but with a plea. I talked about my accident, about the peace I felt, about the vision of the coming blackout. My words were raw, unfiltered, filled with a desperate urgency. I looked directly into the camera and said, "The world is going dark. In 72 hours, all the lights will go out. The signs are here. Please, you have to listen." The video went viral, but not in the way I hoped. People commented with laughing emojis. They called me a conspiracy theorist. A few were kind, expressing sympathy for my break from reality. But no one believed me. I was just another digital oddity, a moment of fleeting entertainment in a world that still felt safe. That's when I knew the digital world was not the answer. The message had to be real. It had to be physical. I printed signs, simple and stark. 72 hours left. Global blackout is coming. I went to a busy public square in Toronto, the very city I had seen plunged into silence in my vision. I stood there, holding my sign, my heart pounding in my chest. People rushed by, heads down, absorbed in their phones. A few glanced at me with curiosity, a few more with contempt. One person stopped, a woman with tired eyes. I told her everything, my voice raw with emotion. She just shook her head, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I wish I could believe you," she said, her voice filled with a silent grief of her own. "But I can't. Not anymore." Her words were a physical blow. The world was so exhausted by its own noise, it couldn't hear the truth. But then, the next sign manifested. Not just on the news, but right there, in front of me. The streetlights overhead began to flicker violently, not in a pattern of a simple short circuit, but in a chaotic, desperate strobe. The large electronic billboard across the square went completely black, not just a technical error, but a sudden, final silence. The phone in a man's hand went dead. The panic was immediate, a ripple that spread from one person to the next. For a brief, terrifying moment, the people around me looked at my sign, at my face, with a flicker of genuine fear. I wasn't crazy. I was a warning. But the power came back on, a temporary surge from a backup grid, and the moment passed. The fear was replaced by relief, and I was just a girl with a crazy sign again. I didn't stop. I went from street to street, from forum to forum. I became a pariah, a prophet with no followers, a voice crying out in a desert of indifference. The news reports grew more frantic, more unexplained outages, more stories of the mysterious hum, more experts scratching their heads. The final sign had not been a one-time event. It was a slow, agonizing bleed into our reality. As the sun began to set on the third and final day, I found a quiet place, a hill overlooking the city lights of Toronto. The lights looked so beautiful, so resilient. But I knew their secret. I knew they were all just temporary. I had done everything I could. The clock in my soul was almost at zero. The world was about to enter a new kind of night, and I could only pray that someone, somewhere, had listened. In a moment of global panic, what do you think would be most important? Food, water, or community? If you had 72 hours, what would you prioritize to prepare? Share your thoughts below. Ponskiuna. I watched the city go silent. One by one, the streetlights and office buildings blinked out, a cascading wave of darkness that swallowed the vibrant pulse of Toronto. The hum, the strange low drone that had haunted us for days, ceased in a final, shuddering gasp. The cars on the street fell silent. The air, which had been thick with frantic energy, was now still. I looked up at the sky, and for the first time in my life, I could see the stars. A million tiny, brilliant points of light, a celestial map I never knew was there, shining down on a world that had gone blind. The chaos I had seen in my vision did not materialize in that first moment. Instead, there was a shocking, profound silence. It was the sound of a reset, a planet holding its breath. And in that silence, I felt a deep, chilling calm. The terror was gone. All that remained was the validation of a truth no one had believed. I wasn't a witness anymore. I was a survivor. My mission wasn't to scream a warning. It was to be a beacon. I walked down the street, my feet touching a pavement that felt different under the darkness. I saw my neighbors emerge from their homes, their faces pale and confused. The walls between us, the ones built by screens and social media, had instantly vanished. We were all just people now, standing in the same darkness, looking for a light that wasn't there. I saw my parents come out, and for the first time since my accident, their eyes weren't filled with pity, but with a dawning, terrifying understanding. The argument was over. The truth was now their reality. The darkness was not just a physical void, it was a spiritual one. The blackout was a forced return, a final, definitive period at the end of a sentence we were all too busy to read. He had shown me this. He didn't want to see us fall. He wanted us to see ourselves. We were so busy building the future, we forgot how to live in the present. We were so connected to our devices, we lost our connection to each other, to our planet, and to our own souls. The blackout wasn't a punishment. It was a choice for us to finally find our way back. My purpose now was not to dwell on the "I told you so." It was to share the peace that came after the truth, the peace I felt in the presence of the divine. The mission he gave me was not to tell them about the darkness, but to show them the light that can be found in a helping hand, in a shared story, in a community that has to build itself up again, one person at a time. The light that shines in the face of fear, a light that we all carry inside us. This isn't an ending, it's a beginning. The world as we knew it is over. The distractions are gone. The digital noise has been replaced by the quiet hum of a new, unknown world. And now, the true test begins. Not of our technology or our power grids, but of our humanity. The choice is not about how to survive, but how to live, how to find hope in the face of despair, how to rebuild a world not with wires and screens, but with faith, with community, and with the simple, profound truth that the light was never outside of us to begin with. Pantandating B and the lights have gone out. The time for talk is over. The choice is now yours. What will you do with the light you have inside you? Will you share it with a world in darkness? If this story resonated with you, I ask you to join our community. Share this video, subscribe to the channel, and let's face the future together. The darkness is coming, but we have the choice to be the light.